Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalrin, and today in this video I want to take another overview and an overlook of Outlaw Rogues for the PTR patch 7.1.5. I am not really excited for the patch coming out for PvE or PvP reasons, mainly because so far the changes that have been done on PTR in terms of rogues are basically negligible. Like, there hasn't been really much done, and I feel like we really do need to talk about it, and Blizzard needs to take a look into it, because otherwise the whole class is going to be a little bit, I guess, shitty in some ways. But first I want to say Assassination Rogue is probably going to be the spec that everybody will be playing, whether it be PvP or PvE, and I feel like Subtlety still has a few buffs that are going to make it PvP viable, and maybe some portion of it will make it PvE usable. But Outlaw is in complete gutter. It is a spec that has gotten zero attention, and whatever Blizzard does make changes towards Outlaw, none of them are in the right direction. And I want to make an overview. I do understand I'm going to get comments saying that, oh, Dalrin is just patch 7.1 PTR. It is not finalized, you shouldn't make any final judgments. But it's not the first time that we've had a PTR where people said, oh, you know, let's just wait and see how it happens. And then the patch drops and there was barely any changes done. Let's say there was a bunch of nerfs or crap, class design creation completely added into the game, and people thought, oh, okay, I'm just not going to look into it until the patch actually comes out. And then the patch comes out and then you're stuck with a shitty design of a class. One of the things that Blizzard has done is lackluster, barely any improvements or any changes, let alone for Outlaw in particular. The only thing they've done with the Rogues recently, besides some hidden buffs, which I'll talk about in a future video, they've added blind to Assassination, basically securing Assassination's capability for PvE and PvP, primarily for PvP, somewhat advantageous for PvE. Now for the Outlaw Rogue in general, what has Blizzard done in order to help out its DPS increases? First of all, you nerfed Deepest Stratagem. By nerfing Deepest Stratagem, you're nerfing the effectiveness of your run-throughs, and run-throughs is all Outlaw Rogues have in terms of DPS increases. They've nerfed run-throughs in the past before, unjustifiably, but they still did it. But Outlaw was still able to be a decent competitor for single target damage, and definitely a massive competitor for cleave and AoE damage. But with a nerf to Deepest Stratagem, you are simply nerfing the one ability that's keeping Outlaw afloat in terms of damage increases. I first of all still don't understand why they nerfed Deepest Stratagem when they could simply buff Vigor or even buff Anticipation, because those two talents are honestly crap compared to Deepest Strat. But instead they decided to nerf Deepest Stratagem, but they did adjust some of the damages. So for Assassination, for example, Vigor ends up being an option. For Subtlety, Vigor or Deepest Strat will end up being one of the other options. I'm pretty sure it's going to go to Vigor. But for Outlaw, Vigor isn't really an option, because Outlaw main damage source is your run-throughs, and when you reduce the effectiveness of your run-throughs, you're simply just reducing your damage. So you have to stay with Deepest Stratagem, which ends up being still a lackluster damage increase, but it actually ends up being a damage decrease compared to the live servers. What they've done for Outlaw, if anything, they've buffed the green skins legendary, which is basically a legendary that says if you use Between the Eyes at 5 comm points or more, at 5 comm points you'll secure yourself a percentage chance to increase the damage of your next pistol shot by an insane amount, by 700%. So basically what you would do is you would line up a blunderbuss proc with that 700%, Between the Eyes at 5 comm points or more, and then use blunderbuss, so then you'll have 4 different ticks of about 800k worth of damage. 4 different ticks of about 800k worth of damage. Currently on the PTR, you have to have the green skins legendary in order to have some sort of meaningful sustainable DPS. And that is an issue, because you basically are tying a PvE spec to a legendary. I understand that on the Warlogs, a lot of people are able to deal massive amounts of damage as an Outlaw because of the green skins legendary, and I think that's an interesting mechanic in general. I think I like that mechanic, but I don't think a spec should be tied to a legendary like that on the PTR especially. What you're doing is effectively you're forcing everybody who doesn't have green skins to basically never play Outlaw unless you're doing some sort of cleave mechanics where you really do need all the cleave damage, and even then you could probably find a different build for Assassination or even Subtlety to replace that. Basically making Outlaw unplayable unless you have the legendary. Secondary, you are nerfing Outlaw for PvP because you cannot use this legendary in PvP. Even if you do have it, you're still not going to be able to deal damage because you nerfed its primary source, which are run-throughs, which were basically the way Outlaw was able to stay competitive in terms of DPS for PvE and PvP. Second thing, Slice and Dice. I'm not sure why that's still on the talents. I know I talked about Slice and Dice, I think that maybe it'll be viable for PvP, but it's really a gimmicky ability. It is basically somewhat of a band-aid for Roll the Bones, but it ends up being for PvE an average loss of 10 to 15% DPS. So if it's a loss for PvE, why would anybody use it for PvP eventually? And I believe that it's just not that good of an ability. With the way that it is right now, what Blizzard is trying to do is maintain Slice and Dice and Roll the Bones, trying to make sure to keep them both now balanced. Instead, what they should do is either remove Roll the Bones, give Slice and Dice, and buff Slice and Dice as its own ability, or remove Slice and Dice and work on Roll the Bones to make it a better ability. Because right now, in the current state that it is very unforgiving because it is so RNG. What they could do is increase the chance for you to get a 2 buff, 3 buff, and a 6 buff, and that honestly might solve most of the issues. It'll make it a little bit more still RNG related with Roll the Bones, but it'll at least give you statistically better numbers, so on average most Outlaw Rogues will be satisfied, and of course this will trickle down fairly well into PvE. One of the things they did right, I feel like, is Alacrity and ramping up the damage for it a little bit quicker. I do like the changes to Killing Spree and Cannibal Barrage, but I feel like Alacrity ends up being the talent that ends up taken too far forward and is going to be advantageous in all situations, PvE or PvP. So I feel like they need to go back to the drawing board, take a look at Cannibal Barrage and Killing Spree to see maybe if there's some sort of incentive to make those abilities worth the use. I guess another thing that I can talk about is True Bearing. They did change it so that now you're able to reduce the cooldown of your stuns, and I'm pretty sure this is primarily a PvE change rather than PvP. I felt that Outlaw PvE and PvP wise, just having the ability to have shorter cooldowns on your defensives and CC was a utility that you alone had. Most players are currently playing Subtlety or Assassination for single target in terms of raids anyway. And in PvP, Assassination and Subtlety are still taking over, where we don't really see Outlaw Rogues right now, even though they have the current utility. So them removing this utility literally puts a nail in the coffin for Outlaw Rogues, in my opinion. This is one of those interesting mechanics that honestly does not break too many phases of the gameplay and offers you a spec that's not really amazing at single target, but can survive somewhat of mechanics as long as you are able to manage your buffs and your cooldowns and your common points together. I felt that was an interesting mechanic, but if they are going to be nerfing this in particular, I honestly think there should be some kind of a big damage buff for Outlaw in general, so that it could be basically the same thing as a Subtlety or an Assassination Rogue. They'll basically have same defenses, they'll basically have same utility, and they'll might as well basically have same damage. But if Blizzard are not going to do so, well then you're basically making a dead spec. And I guess I'm going to tell you the rest of the video by taking a look at some of the talents that are still in play for Outlaw Rogues, which ones are garbage and honestly should be replaced, or which ones should be buffed in some way in order to make them a little bit more comprehensible and useful. I honestly feel like Alacrity is taking a hold in the whole tree set for level 90. Cannibal Barrage and Killing Spree simply do not compare. Even in PvP situations, Alacrity is definitely taken ahead because of its less ramp up time. So I feel like Cannibal Barrage and Killing Spree could either be rotated somewhere else or buffed in one way or another. I honestly feel that Death from buff in 7.1.5 is not that much of a buff, but I guess with the Blade Flurry nerf, it becomes a little bit more of an option. I still feel like it's pretty terrible and its damage could be increased, maybe in the run-through department. I feel like Parlay is still a terrible talent. I don't know who grabs it for PvE or PvP. It is basically useless because in either situation, as soon as you engage into combat with an enemy, Parlay literally becomes useless, while the blind can still be used, even though on a cooldown at least can still be used on a target for CC. I feel that Iron Stomach is maybe not that strong anymore like it used to, and it honestly for PvE or PvP, most cases Elusiveness or Cheat Death ends up being the better option, so I guess it's going to be more narrow to Elusiveness. You basically are opening up Iron Stomach as an ability or a talent that does nothing, and it was a cool idea at one point with some maybe funky combinations for Outlaw in particular, and you had some cool ideas in the past in order of auto talents and maybe even class talents, but all those kind of fell off, and I guess you guys are probably not going to buff that one either. Anticipation. It literally brings 0 DPS increase to the table. Anticipation is awful, but it has an interesting mechanic to work with the Outlaw Rogue weapon. Regardless, it still does not deal any kind of DPS increase. It is not a utility for PvP or PvE. It is pretty much terrible. Hit and Run. I don't really know anybody who uses it because Acrobatic Strikes gives you range and Grappling Hook gives you the ability to immediately move to a target location. I feel like Hit and Run could do some kind of a buffs in general. I don't really know about Swordmaster, Hook Draw, and Ghost Strike. Also, I guess all pretty stable talents. Now, I was going to say something about Swordmaster, but I'm too afraid that Blizzard will just nerf Ghost Strike and Quick Draw in order to make Swordmaster look appealing, kind of like what they did with Deepest Stratagem, except they'll be taking down 2 talents instead of 1. So, I just don't really understand what Blizzard is doing with this, but this is literally everything that I have in terms of Outlaw. I'm currently enjoying Outlaw before patch 7.1.5, but I'm very much not excited for everything that we have so far for patch 7.1.5. I do hope that this video reaches somebody over at the Blues, and I do hope this video reaches as many Outlaw Rogues as possible. Let me know everything in the comments, guys. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, if you agree with any of my points. And otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day. I'm almost done with my finals. Oh, and I hope that everybody gets their green skin legendary no matter what spec you play, because that is the only way you're going to be able to survive 7.1.5 as an Outlaw Rogue. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see all of you in the next one.